Greetings, fellow travelers. Welcome on in. This is the 189th level of the RPG Cave. I am your host for today, the level 199 Human Dark Lord, Ryan Turford. And I'm all alone in the RPG Cave today. Garrett is still away on his vacation, but he will be back next week. So if you've missed Garrett this whole time that he's been away, fret not. Garrett will be back next week. But we've got a show to do this week. I'm very excited to do this one. Yes, I know it's a little bit lonely with just me here, but at least those people who want the show to go by a little bit quicker, there'll be less fluff on this episode of the RPG Cave because it's just me today. Hi. I of course have some things to tell you about, but before we get into that, of course, let's clear the dungeon so we can get to the raid boss as quickly as possible. So, of course, first of all, huge shout out to Boots in our community for gifting 50 YouTube memberships. Holy crap. That's so many memberships. That's like oodles of memberships. Like I couldn't even hold all those memberships in one hand. Shout out to Boots for gifting those over on the YouTube channel during last week's recording of the Xbox Drive show. Shout out to him, or them, I should say. We also have to shout out our new Patreon supporters over at patreon.com/carpoolgaming, starting with Nuke the Bridge, who upgraded to the exclusive tier. I believe they were just on they were on the $1 tier before. Now they're on the exclusive tier. Exclusive. Tim Elgendorf. Tim, I hope I didn't mispronounce your name at all, who joined as a free member, who I have been informed is one of the OGs from the Bobby days. So shout out to you, Tim. Appreciate you coming back to the community. And Brendan Myers, who upgraded to the ultimate producer tier from the exclusive tier. So shout out to Brendan Myers. The Winter Gamer has been activated. Let's go, Brendan. So shout out to Nuke the Bridge, Tim Elgendorf, and Brendan Myers. You know what? That'll become more natural the more I do this. We also have brand new content over on the Patreon. We've got, of course, brand new Patreon content like Seth's Pants episode, which was the Pants episode from this week, as well as Sean's Pants episode will be out tomorrow. I'm also pulling up the schedule to see who we got. Looks like we've got the Miles _of_ Amanda. I believe her episode will be this week's episode as well. So make sure if you've got questions for the Miles _of_ Amanda, please make sure to actually get them ready for Monday's question post. If you, of course, are new to the Carpool community, the Pants Patreon podcast for Patrons podcast is, of course, our bonus podcast over on patreon.com/carpoolgaming. That it's exclusive there. It's kind of like an AMA session where you can kind of just ask the rotating cast of hosts any question you want, and we'll answer them. Within reason, of course. And the question post usually goes up Monday morning on the Patreon. So go over there and leave questions for Amanda if you've got them. Also, we've got a new episode of We the Gamercast with Sam, aka Gizmodo816. Of course, Gizmodo has been in the community for a long time. I've seen them posting quite a few times. So it was actually cool to see Gizmodo make their first appearance on We the Gamercast, so shout out to that episode. Of course, Fuya, we shouted this out last week, but of course, make sure to go check this out. She made a cool video on the YouTube channel talking about our favorite indie games from Summer Game Fest, so make sure to go check that out as well. Also, I believe that the time will be coming to an end soon for the Summer Game Fest merch, so if you haven't picked that up already, make sure to go pick that up as well. Well, with all that housekeeping out of the way, I've got a couple things. To talk about. Not really. I don't actually have things. I tried to come up with things before this episode happened, but I couldn't actually live up to Garrett's lofty expectations. So why don't we actually dive in and do a quick side quest before we get to, of course, reading from the sacred text, of course, because I'm really excited about this week's topic. But I just want to talk about quickly what I've been playing, because first of all, we did an exciting stream over the course this week where I wanted to pick out what my first purchased game of 2025 would be. And I had read a tournament bracket and everyone pitched in and voted. And the winner was an RPG. It was Claire Obscure Expedition 33. Because of course, if people aren't keeping up, I haven't been able to buy games all year. I made kind of a pledge to not buy games for the first 6 months of the year, but candid today, that ended. So I decided to pick up my first game this year, and y'all voted for Clair Obscur Expedition 33. So that was indeed the first game I purchased in 2025. I did pick up a couple other things though. I did pick up the Pokemon DLC, which we'll talk about in a second. I also picked up some other games. I picked up Donkey Kong Bonanza, Shadow Labyrinth, both of which I'm really excited to play next week. And that was about it. That's all I've kind of purchased so far in the year of our Lord 2025. So about that Pokemon Scarlet DLC, now I know everyone was kind of expecting me to jump into Clair Obscur right away, because I just bought it. That was the first thing I bought this year. But I wanted to pop into the Pokemon DLC first because as people who have been listening to the show for a while know, I just, went back to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet when the Switch 2 came out. Love that game. And I really wanted to play that DLC, but I couldn't buy it. So I had to kind of wait. But since the game is still kind of fresh in mind, I didn't want to buy the DLC, put it down, and then just never get to it, because I know that that's what would have happened if I didn't play it right away. So that's what I've been playing. So I played through, over the course of the week, I played through Pokemon, the first pack, the Teal Mask. I thought it was an interesting DLC pack. First of all, each DLC pack kind of gives you like a new kind of like open world to kind of explore, but they're not as big as kind of the main area in Pokemon Scarlet. And the Teal Mask was actually kind of fun. It was a map kind of similar to the original map, but it was more Japanese influence because, the map in Pokemon Scarlet is kind of based around like a Pokemon version of Mexico, or Central America. Whereas, the map that you go to, in the DLC is more just based around like a traditional Japanese small town. Like it almost reminded me of like the small town in like Higurashi or something like that. Like there's like rice fields everywhere that you could go explore. There's like a giant volcano kind of in the middle of the map. And there's like this small town with like all these temples that you're going to like travel around to go visit. So I thought it was interesting. I thought it was fun DLC. I also like that it brought back a lot of older Pokemon, Gen 1 stuff or Gen 2 stuff. I get nostalgic for that stuff. Like the second I could, get a Sandshrew and kind of, upgrade him to Sandslash, I was so excited. But then kind of, the second pack brings you to the Blueberry School, as it's referred to, as like you're brought there as an exchange student. And it's this like this highly technological school that's like built on top of the ocean. So like the school itself is like underwater, but it has this giant area called the terrarium that you explore. And that's kind of its big open map. And it has like these 4 biomes, and then the different biomes, there are, specific Pokemon to that type. But they brought back a lot of the Alohan, Pokemon from Pokemon Sun and Moon. And in fact, there are certain challenges where they're like, okay, you got to go out and collect like Alohan Pokemon. You got to battle like the gym leaders there using only Pokemon that you've captured from that area. So I thought some of that stuff has been pretty cool. I haven't, gone all the way through the second DLC pack. But I've been really, really enjoying it so far. I've been really enjoying kind of this return to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet again with this DLC, and just further emphasizing that I wish this game would have just worked when it came out, or I wish they would have just waited for the Switch 2, because this game is actually really good, but just many people just, were so burnt, and rightfully so, really, really burnt by, the Pokemon Scarlet original version. Playing it on Switch 1, that was just not a good experience. And it's too bad, because again, like I'm really, really enjoying, like this is the most I've enjoyed Pokemon in a very, very long time. And this DLC is just further proof that it's super fun. I also love, the Terra Raid battles as well. And they were always like super easy and not as fun with kind of the lower ranked battles. But now that I've, completed even the post game stuff and unlocked kind of the 6-star battles, like some of those can actually be pretty challenging and fun. Yeah, like I've really, really enjoyed my experience with the Pokemon Scarlet DLC. I'm very glad I picked it up, because I think that it's pretty good. I've also read that just in total, it's about 15 hours to finish both campaigns. So I'm probably about, a third of the way through the second DLC. So I probably will finish it by the time the week's over, before next week's show. So look out for that. So that's kind of what I've been playing right now. Of course, Expedition 33, of course, is just sitting there kind of looming, just waiting for me to finish the Pokemon DLC. But I will play it. I will play it this summer. Like, I definitely will make time for it. Maybe not next week because, I do want to play Donkey Kong. I don't want to, put that on the wayside. I kind of want to play it when it first comes out. But Clear Obscure is probably the game I play after Donkey Kong or Shadow Labyrinth. Although we do have Ninja Gaiden Ragebound this month, which I'm super stoked for too. And that'll be coming out at the end of the month as well. So lots of good games to dive into this month, which is so exciting. But anyways, friends, it is now time to read from the sacred texts. I mean, honestly, we're 11 minutes in the show. We're already getting to reading from the sacred text. The show's flying by today, folks. Let me tell you what. I'm so excited to do this topic. This was actually inspired by watching a recent panel from Too Many Games of from the Spawncast, talking about some of their answering some questions from the audience, and they had a question talking about licensed games. So I thought to myself, hey, we haven't done like an episode talking about licensed games in a very, very long time. So I thought it'd be fun to kind of tier rank the licensed games that I've played. Before we get to that, Adam David, I feel bad for you. Of course, for audio listeners, Adam David in the chat says, I still can't find a Switch 2. I know that they've been popping up a lot more frequently, Adam David. So if you keep your eye out, I think you'll be able to find one. It'll just take some time, but I think you'll get there. But it's just, I know, like, if you didn't buy it within that first week, they've definitely been harder to come by. But I've been seeing them at least here locally in Toronto quite a bit. So I don't know how the supply's been in the States, but here in Canada, there's actually been a lot of them. So I hope you're able to find one, Adam David. I wish you well in your pursuits. But anyways, we're going to tier rank all of the licensed games, all the licensed role-playing games that I've ever played. Now, before I pop up the tier list and show you the games that we're going to rank today, I just wanted to go over quickly what a licensed game is, because not everyone might not even know what that term even means. So a licensed game refers to a video game that is based off some type of license, whether it's a movie, a TV show, comic book, just a normal book, just anything that is any type of property that is outside the world of gaming. Even advertisements count as licensed games, like Cool Spot or Chester Cheetah on the Sega Genesis. Like those are licensed games because they're based off, a mascot, a fast food mascot. But yeah, like I have like a lot of these games here that, first of all, we don't see a ton of licensed games in the realm of role-playing games, which is too bad, because honestly, I would love to see more of them. I also know too that, the list that I have today, it's about 28 games long. It's not all the licensed role-playing games out there. There's a lot of licensed role-playing games that I've missed out on. These are just kind of the ones that I've played. Also, there are licensed role-playing games that are licensed off other video game properties. I chose not to include those for this list because those kind of sit more in the realm of like spin-offs for me rather than licensed games. For example, a good example of that being like Sonic the Dark Brotherhood from BioWare, the Sonic role-playing game. Again, like I feel like that's not really a licensed game. Or Mario Rabbids is another example of a game that like is technically a licensed game, but I don't really classify that. I consider that more of a spin-off. So I wanted to kind of, exclude, video game licenses and just focus on like other licenses outside of this. So let's pop up this tier list. Let's see what we've got to work with here. I apologize to the video viewers, of course, that there are going to be just random advertisements on the thing here. I'm using StreamYard to streamline this whole process, and I can't crop them out. So let's go ahead and hold on. Let me do this here. Oh, no, we can't do that. So we're going to go through this. Again, there's about 28 games here. We're going to rank them for anywhere from S to D. Now, there's a couple games here that I'm going to talk about that are bad. But for the most part, I think most of the licensed role-playing games that I've played are actually pretty good games. So we're going to kind of explore the scale a little bit. So if I rank your favorite game a C as an example, it's not me saying your favorite game is terrible. It's just me saying that, I just didn't like it personally as much as a lot of the other games. Also, this is 100% my opinion that we're going off today. So, it's one of those things where you might not agree with me on some of these games, and that's totally okay. We can still, have a conversation about this stuff. And again, these are just going to be my opinions. So just setting the stage for all the stuff, what we're going to get in here. So we're going to start off with, what could possibly be two of the greatest licensed role-playing games of all time. They actually sit in a lot of people's top games of all time, of course. And we're going to actually get, believe it or not, a lot of people's favorite games of all time on this tier list here, because believe it or not, you might not know that some of these games that we're going to talk about today are even licensed games at all, because they might be based off a book or something, like The Witcher 3 as an example. And you might not think of it as a traditional like movie-based game or something, but it actually fits into the same bucket of paint here. So let's talk about Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, and then we'll actually talk about the MMO Star Wars The Old Republic. So we'll start off with the first one. I love Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. I've talked about it on many shows before. It's honestly one of my all-time favorite video games. It was the reason I bought an original Xbox, because, I was so excited to play it, and I would love it. Ask why? Ask it. A great question, actually. Oh, would the Metro series be considered a licensed series because they're based off books? 100% they would be. Yes, like the Metro series, would be licensed games, but to your next point, they're not role-playing games. So I've played the Metro games. I like them, but they're not role-playing games, so that's why they're not on the list today. Again, we're only ranking the world of licensed role-playing games. Honestly, ask what not why. If we were ranking non-role-playing licensed games, like this tier ranking would be over 100 games long. So like that's why like I wanted to focus in just on role-playing games today. So continuing with Knights of the Old Republic, I love the original Knights of the Republic. I think it's an incredible game. I will say, if I looked at it, from the lens of someone playing it for the first time this year, however, I do think, there are some issues with the game. I do think, it's not super intuitive to play now. I do think it's harder for someone who's never played it before to pick it up. The best proof I have of that is when of course, we finally convinced Sean Capri to play Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, and he just could not get into it. But he forced himself to play it because he decided to. It was a tournament bracket game. He played it on stream, and he had to finish it. He kept saying so. It's one of those things where even though I'm gonna probably put it in S, because I have to put it up there. It's one of my all-time favorite games. I will say that, coming from it from the lens of someone playing it nowadays, it's definitely harder to get into. So while I do recognize that fact, I still think it's an incredible video game. It tells one of the best Star Wars stories ever, and it's an all-time classic for me. So I have to put it up there in S. And similarly enough, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords, is an interesting case. Of course, that was developed by Obsidian rather than BioWare, and they put this game out 9 months after Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic came out. Like, they didn't even necessarily know that the original KOTOR was going to be even a hit before Knights of the Republic 2 was, being developed. They were just kind of developing the game alongside it, and it was really supposed to be this big trilogy of Star Wars Old Republic games. But they never actually really made the third one, although we'll talk about that when we talk about Old Republic in just a second. But the Sith Lords, I actually like this game more than the first game, which is interesting enough. I know that's an opinion that's not shared with everyone, and I'll talk about why in just a second, but I know that the ending in particular is really contentious for a lot of people, especially because of the rushed development cycle. This game had to come out 9 months after Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic did for whatever reason. Like I remember seeing advertisements like while I was playing KOTOR for KOTOR 2 already, and I couldn't believe that the game was coming out so soon. But I was so excited for it because I loved the first game. And the development really just kind of ran out of time, and they really couldn't even finish the game because they were supposed to be this whole other section you were supposed to go to at the end of the game that was supposed to, wrap up the story in a nice, clean way. But the developers kind of just had to, slap the ending together and just call it a day and kind of tee up the things we were supposed to see in like the third KOTOR game. but I still really love it. Like, the writing is on point. I actually like the characters even more in this game. I love the fact that you can actually, convert your party members into Jedi, something you couldn't actually do in the first game. But I also just love the idea that, the game itself is trying to get away from, just the pure good and pure evil aspects of the Force, where even though it's a choice-based game and your choices still influenced your light side and dark side abilities like the first game did, I really like the idea that they tried to, have you consider, well, maybe there isn't really pure good and pure or evil in the world, and maybe everything is just, a shade of gray. Like, I really, really like them exploring a bunch of, complex and interesting themes in this particular game. So yes, I actually love KOTOR 2 even more than the first one. And honestly, this would be an all-timer for me if it wasn't for the rushed ending and for the rushed development on the game. It still has to live in S tier for me. And for me personally, on my own personal scale, I actually rate it above the first game. But I love both. I love both games. I think both KOTOR games are incredible. People should play them if they've never played them, even though I do know it's harder to get into these games, nowadays for the first time in 2024 or 2025. I will also say that it might be easier actually to get into the second one than the first one. But you should definitely play both because they do connect in a good way. So you should definitely have the knowledge and the story from both games. But kind of rounding out the Star Wars train here, we've got Star Wars, The Old Republic, the MMO from BioWare. And if you're talking about games that I was so excited for coming out, dude, The Old Republic was a game that I was so freaking excited about because, again, I love, the first two KOTOR games. It was around this time where I was really like the peak World of Warcraft days for me. So I was really into MMOs when The Old Republic was being developed and was coming out. And when we heard more about it and we heard that it was going to be this story-based MMO with like a focus on the narrative and how they wanted to kind of make the story kind of feel like Star Wars Knights of the Republic 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Like, I thought all that stuff was so cool, and it really, really, got me so excited for Star Wars The Old Republic. However, as we all know, kind of the MMO kind of floundered when it came out, and it really took some time and some updates for the game. It really took a few expansions. It kind of reminds me in a lot of ways of Final Fantasy XIV, where it didn't get off to the best start, but I think if you go and play The Old Republic now, I think it's actually like a really, really cool role-playing game. And again, you can play entirely by yourself now, which is actually really cool. Like, they did a bunch of improvements to kind of make it feel like a single-player MMO that you just happen to play online. I only kind of wish that we got this on consoles or somewhere else besides PC. But all in all, I think The Old Republic is pretty good. Obviously, I will say that the writing I don't think is as good as the first two, Knights of the Old Republic games. But I do think the story goes into some interesting places, especially when you kind of factor the different expansions that we got after the base game. But I'm not going to go too deep into those today. I'm mostly kind of just going to rate kind of the base game. But I do think The Old Republic is pretty good. I think this is kind of like your prototypical B game where it's got some flaws. But I do think it's also a really good experience, and definitely a game now that if someone picked it up for the first time this year and tried to dive into The Old Republic, because I think it's free to play, so you can go actually try it out without even having to buy it. Although there is like a paid subscription you can pay into to give you some extra perks, help your characters level quicker, give yourself some extra inventory space, and a bunch of other like quality of life improvements. I do think this game is one that is really, really worth playing, and I think it's probably a lot more accessible nowadays than the original KOTOR games. So yeah, The Old Republic, I think it's pretty good. Next up, we're going to talk about a bunch of Marvel games. Because, Marvel actually has a pretty good lineage of role-playing games, especially action RPGs. But they even have one of the only tactical role-playing game I actually have on this list. Although actually, we have another one also, but I won't get into that. So let's talk about the X-Men Legends games. For folks that haven't played these were on the Xbox, original Xbox, PS2, and GameCube. And these were action RPGs. They were very similar to the Diablo games where they were top-down games. But unlike Diablo, you actually controlled multiple party members. And you basically got to compose your little 4-man X-Men squad of like your favorite characters that they could go. They all had their individual mutant powers. And the stories were fine and fun. They were nothing really to write home about. But it was more about the action. And also one thing that was cool about this was like the couch co-op. If you had multiple friends to play with, like, oh my God, X-Men Legends was so much fun to play multiplayer if you had a bunch of friends, similar to Diablo, because Diablo is a lot of fun with friends as well. But I think the X-Men Legends games are actually both really good. Both of them, again, came out on the same generation. They only came out really a year and a half apart from each other. But I think both of them are pretty good. So we'll rate kind of the first X-Men Legends. I think this probably goes in the B tier along with the Old Republic. I think it's pretty good. Is it perfect? No. Like there's a lot of, the visuals are nothing to write home about. And the story is, it's fine. But it's got all your favorite characters, and I think it's pretty fun. X-Men Legends 2 Rise of Apocalypse, however, I would rate it a little bit higher than the original X-Men Legends, but it's still probably below the Old Republic for me, also in B tier as well. Again, it suffers from the same flaws as the first one. The story is okay. It's fine and fun, but you're really there for the gameplay, and the gameplay is a lot of fun in these games, especially if you're a big X-Men fan, especially too, because like you'll probably actually geek out with like some of the random, boss encounters that they'll pull up with a bunch of like random X-Men enemies that you might know from the comic books, but you've probably never seen in like the cartoon show before. So moving on though, when the Xbox 360 was coming out, the developers wanted to expand things, and they wanted to actually bring in the rest of the Marvel license in addition to the X-Men. So that's where we got the Marvel Ultimate Alliance games. They were available on pretty much everything under the sun during the Xbox 360 generation. So 360, PS3. I think they were on the Wii. They were also on the PlayStation 2, as well as the original Xbox, or at least the first one was on all those platforms. And this one, similar to X-Men Legends, the stories in these are okay. I think again you'll get a kick out of the Marvel Ultimate Alliance story. If you're a big comic book fan, if you like the Marvel characters. But for me, as someone who is not like super into comic books, or super into Marvel in general, I was mostly here for the gameplay. I thought the gameplay was the best part about these. And again, same thing I can say about these as I can about the X-Men Legends games. The Marvel Ultimate Alliance games were a ton of fun if you had players to play with. But thankfully, with these versions, we had online multiplayer. So even if you didn't have friends locally, you could still play with people online. And it was really fun. In fact, it was actually really sad that they actually pulled that functionality out of the kind of the re-releases we got from these on the PS4 generation that were very quickly delisted. So these games are actually pretty expensive now if you have like the physical copies, because you can't buy these games anymore. People love these games. So again, the Marvel Ultimate Alliance games, I think they're probably better than X-Men Legends. I like the fact that you've got kind of the Marvel roster, the full Marvel roster at your hands. I like also kind of the slate of villains that you kind of have in the Ultimate Alliance, in Marvel Ultimate Alliance in particular. So I think that game is probably the top of these games. And I think the game that actually goes at the bottom of these games, probably still in B tier, although I'm hovering over C tier, is Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2. They tried to make an effort to like really streamline the game with 2. You don't have as many characters to play with, because they try and do kind of the Marvel Civil War storyline, where you either choose Team Cap or Team Iron Man, and the story kind of changes depending on which team, and even the gameplay even changes depending on what team you pick, as well as the cast of characters that you kind of have to work with. But you have less options for your roster, and honestly the gameplay just isn't as fun, I think, in this one. In fact, now that I talk about this more, I think this probably goes at the top of C tier for me. So but I think still think it's a good game, just not not great. I definitely think it's definitely the worst of these 4 games. So that's what I think about the Marvel Ultimate Alliance games. But next up, of course, a game that I was actually pretty excited about, but is a game that totally did not hit with people at all. In fact, this is honestly one of the worst rated games of the 360 generation. This is X-Men Destiny from, Dennis Dyack's studio. Of course, the makers of Eternal Darkness. This, of course, was an X-Men role-playing game where you created your own X-Man and customized what powers you wanted for your character, which honestly, a lot of people talked about in the reviews how they hated that. They wanted to just play as a standard X-Men character. But I don't know. I thought it was actually kind of cool that you got to create your own character, even though, obviously they're not as cool as kind of your standard X-Men characters. I liked the fact that they explored the direction of you kind of being a new superhero in this superhero world. I thought that aspect was actually pretty cool. But man, the story sucked. The gameplay sucked in this one. It was an action RPG as well. And it was not good. So this is my first D tier of the ranking, even though there are things that I like about this game. X-Men Destiny is probably the worst game on this list that we're going to talk about today. So it goes squarely in the D tier for me. And the last Marvel game to kind of round things out, of course, is the latest Marvel game, Marvel's Midnight Suns, which is a tactical role-playing game from the developers at Firaxis, who, of course, made the XCOM games. And I like this game a lot. I think it is pretty good. The story is actually pretty fun. The cast of characters are great. The combat's good. I know that a lot of people were freaking out before this game came out because, it was very card focused, but the cards are really just have your abilities on them that you use. So it really almost felt like, even though it had this weird card system, the cards almost just acted like the battle menu. So it didn't really bother me as it did other people. And it kind of had this BioWare feel to it as well, where you had this system where in between missions you'd go hang out with the other superheroes in this creepy castle that you were hanging out in, and you got to know each of the characters, and you got to go on friendship quests, kind of like Mass Effect or other BioWare games in a lot of ways. I really like that aspect as someone who likes the BioWare games, and also too I liked kind of the gothic kind of twist to this game, because it's got a kind of creepy crawly, kind of Halloween inspired, because again it's based off kind of the Midnight Sun storyline, where a lot of the characters are getting turned into vampires. So I thought all that stuff was pretty cool. So Marvel's Midnight Suns, this is definitely an A for me. I think this game's actually really good. Again, the strategy combat in particular is just a big highlight. I actually really love the actual combat in this game, and the story just helps that put it above the other Marvel games with the story actually being pretty good in this one. So shout out to Marvel's Midnight Suns. But now let's talk about RPGs based off books. And of course, this one also is kind of based off the movie because it's based off the movie license. But the next one is The Lord of the Rings, The Third Age. This was available in the PS2, Xbox, GameCube generation. It's available on all three of those platforms. And it's a turn-based role-playing game in the Lord of the Rings universe, where you play as kind of a bunch of unique characters as they're trying to link up with the Fellowship. They're basically like a second band of heroes that has been sent out by Rivendell in order to try and catch up with the Fellowship and to assist them. So they're almost kind of working in the background of kind of the main characters from the Lord of the Rings books. And in fact, you're going to a lot of the same places that they go in the movie. And I like this game. I think it's pretty fun. I will say though that as much as I like the story and the characters and even some of the combat elements, this game can be very tough. This game can be, kind of annoying to play. I don't really love, the act of, the combat in this game, because it can actually get pretty difficult. There are some serious difficulty spikes later on in the game that I just don't particularly love. But I do think this game is pretty good if you're looking for a good Lord of the Rings RPG experience. Then honestly, this is the best you're going to get. I do know that there's another game, another Lord of the Rings action role-playing game as well, called Lord of the Rings War in the North, that came out on Xbox 360. I just haven't played that one, so it's not on this list. But I do think The Third Age is pretty good. Where do I rank this one though? I think it's probably above X-Men Legends 1 and 2, but below Marvel Ultimate Alliance on the B tier. I know that B tier is filling up fast. Don't worry. We got a lot of games that are going to go outside the B tier in just a second. But I do think The Lord of the Rings, The Third Age is pretty good for a licensed role-playing game. And definitely, I think, kind of in the same camp as the Marvel Ultimate Alliance games. But moving on. Speaking of games based off books that people might not even be aware of, it's time to talk about CD Projekt Red games. Of course, The Witcher 3. Of course, the entire Witcher trilogy I could have on here, but I haven't played Witcher 1. I've only played Witcher 2 for about 4 or 5 hours, so I didn't want to rate it based off a very short stint with that game. But The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is a game that I've talked about many times on the show. Is a game that I haven't finished. I think it's a game that I really enjoyed. I think it's fun. But I also felt like it just goes on so long, like too long, like noticeably long. Like there are games that like role-playing games that I'll play that, I have that I, can play for 100 hours and it doesn't feel super long to me. But Witcher 3, it just feels, I can feel how long it is. Like I can feel it go on forever. And that's my only gripe with the game. That's why I didn't really stick with it. Like I got to the 55-hour point in Witcher 3, and I was just like, you know what? I'm good. I don't need to play any more of this because I really enjoyed what I played. And, I don't really need to play any more of it. I got everything out of this experience that I really wanted. So that's kind of how I feel about Witcher 3. I do think I recognize the excellence there. I think it's an incredible game. However, I did mention off the top that this list is 100% predicated on my personal, 100% personal viewpoint on this tier list. So while many people will rate The Witcher 3 an S tier, I put this at the top of A tier from me personally. Again, I have to factor in the fact that it goes on just a little too long for me personally, but I do recognize how incredible the game Witcher 3 is, and I really, really enjoyed my time with Witcher 3. I do think it's a great game. Maybe one day I go back and finish it or give it kind of a second chance. It's already on my list of games this year that I haven't actually, given a second chance to yet that I want to. There's only a couple games really left there, and Witcher 3 is one of those games. So maybe this changes in the future, but I have to, right now, if you were to ask me where I kind of put Witcher 3, top of A tier for me. However, the game I actually put in S tier now is Cyberpunk 2077. Again, this is a game that I purposely didn't finish as well, for full transparency, because, Garrett is going to be playing this for the first time as part of Garrett's backlog adventure as soon as he comes back from vacation, and him and I are both going to play through the game together. And he's going to play it for the first time, and I'm going to try and, actually finish the game this time. Because, I played this game almost to the end, but I didn't finish it because I was playing it on PlayStation 4 Pro, and I did the thing where I was like, oh, I'm just going to wait till the PlayStation 5 comes out, and when there's an upgrade for it, and I'm going to play it there. And that day never came. So I'm actually really, really excited to actually hop into Cyberpunk, for almost like fresh, almost feeling like the first time, because it's been like 4.5 years since this game came out. So it's been a long time. And ask what not why asks an important question. Wait, Cyberpunk is a licensed game? It is. It's actually based off a pen and paper role-playing game, similarly titled Cyberpunk. So it is actually a licensed game similar to Witcher 3, which is crazy to think about. But yes, in fact, CD Projekt Red, I think at this point, they've only really done licensed games because they've only really done the 3 Witcher games and then Cyberpunk. And then, of course, variations of the Witcher, like Gwent and stuff like that. So Cyberpunk is technically a licensed game, but I like this game a lot. Like, this was a game that, when I played it, I suffered through that PlayStation 4 version, just playing it on base PS4. Even though it didn't really run well, it sucked to play. But man, the game was so good. Like, the story was incredible. I loved exploring Night City. I loved doing all the side quests, and just everything about this game was so fun that, despite the technical limitations, I powered through it because I am just enjoying the game that much. So I'm actually super stoked to actually get to play it again, almost like for the first time, because again, it's been like 4 years since I played it for the first time. And I'm also excited to be playing it along with Garrett. And again, we'll do a full episode dedicated to Cyberpunk 2077. We'll actually talk about more about the license stuff when we kind of get into that full episode later this year after Garrett and I both finish it. So I'm super stoked for that. This definitely goes up in the S tier along with KOTOR and KOTOR 2. It's not an all-timer game for me, so it probably sits still behind KOTOR 1 and definitely behind KOTOR 2 for sure. So that is definitely up there in the S tier. Now, again, we continue with games based off books. People might be surprised about this, but if you remember our episode about Parasite Eve is also a licensed game. Of course, Parasite Eve, the original, it's based off a Japanese book, which is interesting. But it only loosely borrows ideas from the Japanese books and kind of goes off in its completely own direction. But then it's interesting because the book series actually continued after the Parasite Eve games ended, and they actually worked the character of Aya Brea, who's kind of the main character in Parasite Eve, into the books, the Parasite Eve books. So I thought that was super interesting, where like it was almost like Mortal Kombat the movie and how it really kind of influenced the story development of the Mortal Kombat games going forward. And in the same way here, like this Parasite Eve, the games, how successful they were, actually really influenced the book series that it was based off in a crazy way. So I kind of love that fact. It's kind of the opposite of what you see from Witcher, where the author came out and talked about the fact that, the Witcher games aren't really kind of based off his original vision for the original Witcher books. And that if people wanted kind of his original vision, you should go read the Witcher books instead. But I kind of love that this is kind of the opposite of that, where the author liked the game so much that they were like, hey, let's incorporate some of this stuff into the book series. So beyond that, though, Parasite Eve, people here talk about Parasite Eve forever. Honestly, this is an all-timer game for me. I love Parasite Eve. It's one of my favorite games of all time. It's, of course, a turn-based RPG that, it's not like a lot of other turn-based role-playing games. It's also horror-based, which, of course, I love. I love kind of horror-based video games, especially now in my older age, where I've really come to appreciate the horror genre so much more than I ever did as a teenager when this game first came out. Parasite Eve is at the top of that tier for me. I love this game. Parasite Eve 2, on the other hand, though, is not really a role-playing game. Like it's more of a Resident Evil style game that happens to have role-playing elements. So it is more of an action RPG, but it's still a role-playing game. It still technically counts for this list. And I think this game is okay. I think it's good. It kind of sits in the Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2 category for me, where I still think it's worth playing. I still think it's pretty good. But it's not nearly as good as the first game. It makes me sad that they, looked at Resident Evil and they were like, hey, we need to make it more like those Resident Evil games, strip some of this other RPG stuff out. It kind of reminds me of what EA did with Mass Effect 2, but to an even higher degree of stripping the role-playing game elements out, which is too bad, because honestly, the role-playing game elements were some of the best things about the first Parasite Eve. And it led to some really, really tough situations in the original game. So I actually like Parasite Eve 2. I think it's still worth playing, but it's in the okay to good category for me. So I think it's fine. So C tier, top of C tier is where I kind of put that one. Next up is a game that actually people would probably be very surprised to see on a game like list like this, because this isn't a game that people typically think of as a role-playing game, but this actually is an action RPG. It just happens to be a beat-em-up action RPG. We're talking about Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the game, of course, based off the manga series by Brian Lee O'Malley. And of course, the movie of the same name as well. In fact, it came out at the same time as the movie, but the game is mostly based off the book itself specifically. It has characters that didn't really appear in the movie. And I love Scott Pilgrim, the game. I think it's a really fun beat 'em up game. But it's got all those RPG elements because you're leveling up your characters. You're giving them, different pieces of equipment. You're giving them, they're learning different skills as they level up. It's very similar to a game like River City Girls or, River City Ransom, because those are, they're beat 'em up games, but they're also technically action RPGs as well, kind of in the same vein as something like Scott Pilgrim is. And I know Scott Pilgrim is kind of on like kind of what people would kind of put on like the line of what an RPG is, but I qualify it as an RPG, and I think it's a pretty good one. So, of course, the music, the visuals, everything about this game, it's so beautiful to look at. The music is incredible. Again, the beat 'em up action is honestly probably its only downside, because I think it's the beat 'em up action is pretty good, but definitely not the best beat 'em up out there. But I still probably put this at the bottom of A tier, probably behind Marvel Midnight Suns. That's probably where I put Scott Pilgrim. I think it's an incredible game. Definitely a lot of fun if you have 4 players locally to play with. Dude, this game is so fun. But I definitely think it does suffer a little bit, especially if you're playing by yourself, for sure. Next up, we're going to move into the world of anime licensed RPGs, and we're starting off with a pretty good one. This is Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, available on all current gen platforms, or even PS4 and Xbox One. And they had this big ambition over at Bandai Namco to tell the entire Dragon Ball Z story in one video game. And then even with the DLC, they actually explore all of the entire Dragon Ball Super storyline, as well as we've got the Dragon Ball Daima stuff that's coming out as well for it. That's coming out soon. That explores the entire Daima story. But Dragon Ball Z Kakarot is a game that I liked, but first of all, it's got the nostalgia factor down pat. 100% visual design, like all of the cutscenes for this game are gorgeous. They feel like they are just ripped from the anime, even though they play out in engine, in 3D. The game is cel shaded and it has like that Dragon Ball Z look to it. Like it looks like you're kind of playing the show. But where this one kind of loses steam for me is the repetitive combat, because it is kind of a button mashing, action RPG. I know when Donnie and I did a review for this game back in the day, back when Kakarot was new. We talked about, how the things we liked and didn't like. And Donnie was definitely much higher on this game than I was. And the way he kind of equated it to is that to him, it kind of felt more like a Dynasty Warriors game. Where there's a ton of enemies on screen. They don't really matter. And you're kind of mashing the same button over and over again, or the same couple buttons over and over again. And that was one of the aspects I just didn't like about it. Like, when it got, like, that's fine in a shorter game, but this game's like 35, 40 hours long. It's a really long game. And just that the combat itself just weared on me as the game went on. At the same time, though, everything else about the game was great, though. I loved exploring the Dragon Ball world. I loved how they kind of mapped everything out, and you could fly around everywhere. You could fly to Master Roshi's island. You could fly to the Capsule Corporation. You could fly to all of the locations that you kind of remember from the Dragon Ball franchise. And there's a ton of fun side quests from like all the fun side characters from the Dragon Ball franchise that I love, that they kind of incorporate that. Like, you could feel like how much they loved the Dragon Ball series, the creators, when creating this game. So there's a lot of love poured in this game. I just feel like the game goes on a little too long, and it's just the combat's just too monotonous for me. So at the same time, it still probably goes I think this is either at the top of C tier or at the end of B tier. I'm gonna put it at the top of C tier. I think putting it just ahead of Parasite Eve 2 is probably where I go with this game. And again, if this game was only like 20 hours long, this probably would have been in the A tier for me, maybe top of B tier. But man, it just goes on way too dang long for the style of game that it is. I wish it was shorter. And I think that really would have helped this game a lot. But moving on, we've got a turn-based role-playing game that I actually really like. This is Fairy Tail. This is based off the anime of the same name, where you play as, mages from the Fairy Tail Guild, and they go out on goofy quests together. That's kind of the Fairy Tail anime kind of in a nutshell. This is a game made by Dusk, the same developers as the Atelier series. So you don't have like the same kind of crafting stuff or alchemy stuff as you do from the Atelier games, but it takes the really good turn-based combat from those games and puts it in the shell of the Fairy Tail anime. And I like this game a lot. Like, I was expecting this game to be pretty good, but then when I played this game, this was a game I actually enjoyed a lot more than I thought I was going to. It was a game that really surprised me in a good way. Like, I think the Fairy Tail role-playing game, I would say, first of all, any fan of Fairy Tail should absolutely play this game, especially if you like turn-based role-playing games. I think you'll actually really, really enjoy this game. However, if people are not into Fairy Tail, I do think it's a tougher ask because, they motor through the game story at a quick enough pace where, like, honestly, if you haven't watched the anime or if you haven't read the manga, you're honestly going to probably get lost at some point. So I definitely would not recommend this to people who have not watched or at least consumed fairy tale content in some way. But I do think it's an excellent role-playing game. I think it's a lot better than it has any right to be. And I put this squarely at the bottom of A rank. Behind Scott Pilgrim is probably where I put Fairy Tale. I think this game is very, very good. Well, next up, speaking of games that surprised me, when I saw that Ubisoft was developing action role-playing games based off the Naruto franchise, I was very, very surprised. But I was also really into Naruto at the time, especially because, this was around the time, I think that Naruto Shippuden, we were kind of waiting for that to start. This was when like the Naruto fillers were just endless. And we were just waiting for kind of the next big Naruto thing. But Ubisoft decided what they wanted to do is over the course of 2 games, they were going to tell the entire story of the Naruto franchise, very similar to what we saw from Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. But it did the thing that, I talked about with Kakarot, where it's just, I didn't really feel like the same fatigue with these games as I did with Kakarot, where even though like their gameplay styles are very similar, where you're kind of leveling your Naruto characters in both Rise of the Ninja and the Broken Bond. You're getting new abilities, you're getting new equipment, you're doing all the RPG things, but the gameplay just wasn't as monotonous as this one. But I do really love kind of the cel shaded look to this game. And again, similar to what I talked about with Kakarot, the cutscenes look great. They look like they're ripped from the anime, although obviously they don't look as good as something like Kakarot because this is an earlier Xbox 360 game. But I do think Naruto Rise of a Ninja in particular is actually a really strong action RPG. I think this probably goes at the top of B tier for me. I think it's actually a really good action RPG. Even if you're not into Naruto, I actually think you probably enjoyed this game, and I think it's pretty good. But honestly, its sequel, The Broken Bond, kind of takes all of the quality, gives it some extra quality of life improvements. It improves the combat in a lot of ways. It also just tells the part of the Naruto story from the original series that I'm actually even more into than the first game. So I think this probably actually goes at the bottom of A tier, or maybe even the top of B tier. Naruto The Broken Bond, I think, is a really excellent action RPG. Especially, again, if you're into Naruto, like this is a no-brainer. Obviously, if you haven't, watched Naruto, you should play the first game first. And it doesn't suffer from and I do think these games don't really suffer from the same thing that Fairy Tail has, where because they decided to put this storyline over 2 games instead of 1, even though they're shorter than a game like Fairy Tail is, the story doesn't feel as rushed. Like you naturally are able to digest all of the the core parts of the Naruto story in a digestible way that I think would actually be helpful for even newcomers to the franchise. Because I know a lot of people who didn't really know anything about Naruto were looking for new games to play on Xbox 360, especially because Rise of the Ninja came out in kind of the earlier years of the Xbox 360. Like they were looking for something to play on their new shiny box, and this game came around. And people played it, and they actually got into Naruto because of this game. So I actually think like there are people that, if you're not into Naruto, maybe check this game out if you like action RPGs. And then you might actually, get one over and actually, want to actually watch the Naruto series, because I think it's pretty good. But moving on, our last anime game here that I have, to talk about here is actually from Square Enix. This is on the PlayStation 2. This is Full Metal Alchemist 2. The Curse of the Crimson Elixir. There are actually a couple Full Metal Alchemist games on the PlayStation 2, and they're all action RPGs from Square Enix. But 2 was the one that actually reviewed really well. It was a game that, I didn't pick up the first one, and I still to this day haven't played the first Full Metal Alchemist game. But the sequel, was one I was really interested in. The nice thing about these Full Metal Alchemist role-playing games is that they're not trying to retell the story of Full Metal Alchemist. They're trying to tell new stories in the world of Full Metal Alchemist, which I actually appreciated, especially if you weren't into Full Metal Alchemist, or if you haven't watched the anime or read the manga, you'd probably actually feel right at home here, because this is actually a pretty fun action RPG where you mostly play as Edward Elric, and of course you've got your brother Alphonse in his suit of armor helping you out, and you have you learn different alchemy powers throughout the course of the game as Edward kind of develops his alchemy. You get different pieces of equipment. It does all the action RPG things that you know and love. And it told actually a pretty good story that was kind of like a pretty good kind of side story in the Full Metal Alchemist world. I think this game is actually pretty darn good. Do I think it's, A tier? Probably not. I think this probably sits kind of in the middle of the pack in B tier, I think. I think this is probably something strong. I think it's stronger than X-Men Legends 1 and 2. Is it stronger than Lord of the Rings: The Third Age? Probably is, I think. I think it's probably a better game than that. But I think it's just behind Star Wars: The Old Republic. I'd probably put it kind of in the middle of B tier is kind of where I'd probably place this game. I think it's a pretty good action RPG. Again, if you're into Full Metal Alchemist, I think these games, like the Full Metal Alchemist games themselves, from what I hear from the other ones, are also pretty good. They are kind of on my bucket list of games I want to play at some point, especially because I love Full Metal Alchemist series and manga. So make sure to check that out as well. A couple other anime games I do want to mention before we move on that I haven't played yet that I really really want to. Inuyasha for the PlayStation 2. It does kind of the X-Men Destiny thing where you're kind of creating this character. And it enters the Inuyasha world. And I like the idea of kind of inserting like a new character and telling like a side story in the same universe. And that's one I really, really, really want to check out. And of course, the other Full Metal Alchemist games I really would be interested in checking out at some point as well. So moving on, we've got, two RPGs based off a TV series, being South Park. Of course, we're going to talk about South Park: The Stick of Truth first, of course, a turn-based RPG from Obsidian, and this game is so good. I love South Park: The Stick of Truth. I'm not even a huge South Park fan. I don't love South Park, but I really enjoyed South Park: The Stick of Truth a lot. Ubisoft and Obsidian absolutely nailed the writing, the world. I love the fact that they kind of mapped out the world of South Park for the first time. I love the fact that Trey Park and Matt Stone, the creators of South Park, were really really involved with this game as well, and it was just a ton of fun to play. Visually it looked great as well. It looked like you were just playing part of the show. And again, it had even though it was a turn-based game, it felt like it was Mario RPG, where you had to kind of like time button presses with the actions of your characters, even though it was turn-based. So this game, I think, is a ton of fun to play. It definitely sits in the A tier for me. It probably, I'm trying to think, where do I put this game? I think, honestly, it doesn't really have many flaws. Like it's the perfect length of the game. Honestly, the only thing holding it back from S tier for me is I'm just not super into South Park. But this game, made me a believer, made me want to go back and maybe try watching South Park again. So I think it probably goes at the top of A tier. Do I put it before Witcher or after Witcher 3? I think I enjoy it more than Witcher 3. Honestly, I think I do. Like, I recognize the excellence in Witcher 3. I know, again, as I mentioned when talking about Witcher 3, a lot of people probably put Witcher 3 in S tier, but for me, it's probably at the top of A tier. And I think South Park: The Stick of Truth just narrowly edges it out, where it's like on the line between that and S tier for me. And I definitely think it probably sits at the top of A tier. Moving on, though, to its sequel, though, South Park: The Fractured But Whole. This is a strategy role-playing game where they were mostly inspired by Fire Emblem and other strategy role-playing games. However, this time around, it was based around the character's superhero alias, the secret identities. And I don't know about what it was. The combat just didn't really feel great to play. Like, it felt kind of off to me. The story was okay to me. Like, I don't know. I just wasn't really into South Park: The Fractured But Whole nearly in the same way that I was the first game. Where I think this game is just okay. I think it's fine. I do know that this game has its defenders, but I also know a lot of people hate this game a lot too. But I'm kind of right in the middle with this one. Like, I think this is definitely a C tier for me. It probably goes behind Parasite, even ahead of Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2, where I think it's pretty good. South Park: The Fractured But Whole, Ask But Not Why, I think was actually done by a different developer. In fact, I'm going to look it up real quick because I know it's not done by Obsidian. It's done by a different studio. This developer was it was just Ubisoft San Francisco. So it was just Ubisoft took it internally. So the Obsidian wasn't as involved. Trey Parker and Matt Stone also weren't as involved this time around either. So I think the game just didn't really suffer. I think the game suffered because of that a little bit. Where I just don't think it's as good as the first game. But it has some fun elements. But I think it's okay. But moving on, another set of games that people probably put it in the S tier, but also people who have been longtime listeners of the show know where I kind of sit on these next two games I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the Kingdom Hearts games now, which of course are licensed games based off the Disney property. Obviously, this kind of breaks my rule a little bit about including games that also incorporate video game licensing, because they do license characters and themes from Final Fantasy as well. But Kingdom Hearts, again, like, I'm not a huge Disney fan, and I know a lot of people who are really into Disney really like these games. But Kingdom Hearts for me, the story is convoluted and kind of a mess, although it is less so, I think, in these first two games that I'm going to talk about here. Again, Kingdom Hearts has a bajillion games kind of in its franchise, and I haven't played any of them other than the first two. And I think these games are good, not great. Like, I'm not super into the action RPG combat in these ones. This was kind of my first time kind of playing a Tetsuya Nomura led game as well, which is why the story is kind of all over the place. The combat's not really as fun to me personally. I know a lot of people would disagree with that, but to me, I don't really love the action combat in Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, especially like as someone who played these games later in life. I do think they're harder for people that are not into Disney to really, really get into from the combat standpoint of view. However, I did really like the first game a lot more than I liked Kingdom Hearts 2, and which again is a different opinion than a lot of people have, because I know a lot of people actually really love Kingdom Hearts 2. And yes, I know it has a lot of kind of like quality of life improvements, but I think that these games probably go in the B tier for me. I think Kingdom Hearts 1 probably slots behind Lord of the Rings: The Third Age for me. I think that's where I kind of have to put that one. Kingdom Hearts 2 probably right behind it, honestly. Right above, X-Men Legends 1 and 2. It kind of like at the tail end of the B tier for me. And again, I know. YouTube commenter, I can already see you writing this comment, talking about how much you love Kingdom Hearts. I totally get it. Again, this tier list, 100% based off my opinion and my opinion alone. And I'm just not super into Kingdom Hearts in the way other people are. And that's okay. I recognize, again, these are games that a lot of people love. The people love Disney. And they're just not as much for me, I think. Next up, we're going to talk about the Baldur's Gate series. So Baldur's Gate, of course, going all the way back to the late 90s on the PC. And these games are based off the Dungeons and Dragons license. So they are technically licensed games based off the D&D license. And again, there's a ton of other D&D, licensed role-playing games. You've got Neverwinter Nights. You've got Icewind Dale. You got a bunch of Planescape Torment. You got all those other ones. I'm not... these ones, I'm only going to talk about the Baldur's Gate games today, mainly because I haven't really put a ton of time in a lot of those other games. So bear with me here. So let's kind of rate the 3 Baldur's Gate games, because believe it or not, the first 2 Baldur's Gate games I actually finished back in the day. So I've actually played through both of these games here that we're about to talk about. And I like these games a lot. So Baldur's Gate 1, of course, this is the type of game that I think, again, would be kind of harder for people to go back to today. But, it's got that BioWare charm to it. You're talking to your teammates. It's turn-based combat that is really, really strategic and fun to play with, but it's also brutally difficult to play through as well. Like, I think it's definitely on the harder side of things. The story is really good. Like the writing is incredible. Like, it's definitely, BioWare, even though it's humble beginnings for them as a studio, I do think this game is really good, but I also think it kind of, is not as high on this tier list simply because it is probably sitting behind its other 2 counterparts here. Because I definitely think it's the worst probably of these 3 Baldur's Gate games. So I probably would put this one at the top of B tier, ahead of Naruto Rise of a Ninja, breaks my heart to not have Naruto at the top of B tier. But I think that's a good place for Baldur's Gate, the original. Baldur's Gate 2, on the other hand, Shadows of again, kind of picking up the where the story after the first expansion from Baldur's Gate kind of leaves off, where you wake up in a dungeon, you meet Minsk and Boo right away, you meet a bunch of other adventurers, recognizable characters from the D&D franchise, and again, I think this is even better of a game than the first one. Again, it's a lot of great quality of life improvements over the first game. Also, the story is just so much better. And honestly, of the Baldur's Gate games, this is probably honestly my favorite. So I think this definitely goes in A ranking for me. I think I put this one behind Witcher 3 is probably where I put Baldur's Gate 2. I think this game is really, really solid. And I think it's really good. And again, it's a game that I think, like, if I played nowadays, though, would I be as into it? Probably not. Like, I would probably be more into the next game we're about to talk about, which is Baldur's Gate 3, which is a game that, I've tried numerous times to get into Baldur's Gate 3, but it just hasn't grabbed me in the way that it just grabs everyone else. Like, I basically get to the Act 1 every single time I go back to this game, but I never get past that point. Like, I'm just not really super into this game. At the same time, again, similar to Witcher 3, I recognize the greatness of this game. I enjoy it a lot. I enjoy what I played of it, but it just never really grabs me beyond that point. So I probably put this at the bottom of A tier. Again, I recognize this is an S tier game for a lot of people, but for me, I think it's probably the bottom of A tier because I still recognize it's a great game, but maybe not, the best game in the world. So finally, 2 final role-playing games that I want to talk about here, both from the same studio, both based off movies from the 80s. Of course, we're going to talk about Terminator Resistance first off. Even though this is mostly a shooter, it's also an action role-playing game. It's definitely more of a shooter than something like Fallout is, but it is definitely more RPG heavy than a lot of other first-person shooters are. This is based off the Terminator franchise, and this is, again, I love the fact that they didn't really tell the story of the movies. They're telling the story of an original character who's in the future of the Terminator world where the machines have taken over. And I love the fact that it ties brilliantly into the original movie and adds to the mythos of those movies. And it's a game that, was plagued with technical problems when it came out. But after those were very quickly fixed after a couple weeks, I think, after the game came out. Like the development team that here actually went through and actually patched these games pretty quickly. And they actually run really well now, especially if you get kind of the newer PS5 version of Terminator Resistance. I think this game is very solid. If you're a Terminator fan, like, this is a slam dunk of a game. Honestly, I love this game a lot. But I also recognize too that there's a lot of cheesy moments in this game too. But also, the Terminator franchise is also full of cheesy moments too. Like, it feels right in line with the IP that it's based off of. So I think this game probably goes right behind Naruto Rise of Ninja and above Star Wars The Old Republic in kind of the B tier range. I think this game is great. However, a game that I actually think is probably actually even better, that, has a lot of the quality of life improvements that I wish we had in the first game that feels a little less cheesy, is RoboCop Rogue City. This came out a couple years ago on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series consoles. And this game is a trip. If you love RoboCop, you're going to love this game. If you've never played it, this game is awesome. You play as RoboCop and you almost feel like a tank as you're kind of like, moving, a lot slower than other characters in other first person shooters. Cause your RoboCop in the movies it's not a fast mover. He walks kind of slowly. He's like, I love too that they got the audio effect noise down is like, choo, choo, as he like walks. Cause he's got like that noise as he kind of moves around. But like, he's like picking up dudes and throwing them through walls. You're like picking up like monitors and like, fire hydrants and stuff. And you're like throwing them at dudes. Like, this game is so cool. And then you're kind of upgrading RoboCop along the way, giving him like kind of new improvements to kind of, make him a leaner, killing machine. I will say though, that this game Again, it's another one that kind of sits on the line between what's a role-playing game and what's not, because this one, similar to Mass Effect 2 or what I talked about with, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2, is they kind of strip down a lot of the role-playing elements from this one. And it's not as much of a role-playing game as as Terminator Resistance is, but I do think it's actually a really solid game. Like, this goes definitely at the bottom of A rank, I think, is where I put this one. RoboCop Rogue City, I think it's an excellent, excellent game. People should play it, especially if you like RoboCop. I think this is a slam dunk if you do. But anyways, let's roll down our tier list, then our finalized tier list for the audio listeners as well, in case you're not watching the video version. So, of course, S tier, we've got Parasite Eve, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords, and Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, and Cyberpunk 2077. A tier, we've got South Park: The Stick of Truth, The Witcher 3: Wild Hunt, Baldur's Gate 2: Shadows of Amn, Marvel's Midnight Suns, Scott Pilgrim, the video game, Fairy Tail, Naruto: The Broken Bond, Baldur's Gate 3, and RoboCop Rogue City. B tier, we've got Baldur's Gate, Naruto: Rise of the Ninja, Terminator Resistance, Star Wars: The Old Republic, Fullmetal Alchemist 2, The Curse of the Crimson Elixir, Marvel Ultimate Alliance, The Lord of the Rings: The Third Age, Kingdom Hearts 2, X-Men Legends 2, The Rise of Apocalypse, X-Men Legend 2, and then C tier, we've got Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, Parasite Eve 2, South Park: The Fractured But Whole, and Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2, and then in the D tier, all alone down there, X-Men Destiny. So, what do you think about my list? What were some of your favorite, licensed role-playing games? I would love to hear from you in the Discord, or kind of put together your own list. I would love to know what people's favorite games are. But speaking of favorite games, of course, we've got one inquiry from the NPCs, the non-podcast characters this week. We've got Ron, aka Savoy Prime, who says, "Hey Moose, on the loose. Hope you're doing good. It's currently 83 degrees Fahrenheit here as I type this morning." First of all, Ron, I love the fact that you're including a weather report in here. Of course, I haven't even brought up the weather on this show. Thank you for reminding me. It's currently 30 degrees Celsius here in Toronto at the time of recording, which 30 degrees Celsius to Fahrenheit is 86. So actually, it's a little bit warmer here in Canada than it is where you live, believe it or not. My answer before I even say it: Knights of the Republic and Knights of the Republic 2. The first KOTOR game, KOTOR was the reason I purchased an Xbox, and the game didn't let me down. It's one of the GOATs for me. Ron, I love the fact that you and I also bond over Knights of the Republic 1 and 2. I love that. I love to hear that. And again, I think a lot of people kind of have the same story where, like, they bought the Xbox. If they didn't buy it for Halo, they bought it for Knights of the Republic, I think. Like, that was like the other big, like, system selling game for the original Xbox. Although the other one I would argue probably is the original Forza. It's probably another one of those games as well. But I think that's super interesting. But Ron has a second question. Do you think Penny Blood will find a publisher? It's seriously struggling to find one, and I hope it does. I kickstarted it and Armed Fantasia during the Duel campaign. Have a great episode. So, for folks out there who don't know what's going on here, who don't know anything about this situation, Penny Blood was and Armed Fantasia were two games that were part of the same Kickstarter. They were part of this, like, dual Kickstarter campaign where, if you help fund one, you help fund both games. And they were two games from, former developers who worked at the studios who worked on the original Wild Arms as well as the original Shadow Hearts games. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to create spiritual successors to both, Wild Arms and Penny and Shadow Hearts. And they created these two games, Penny Blood, which is a spiritual successor to, Shadow Hearts, and Armed Fantasia, which is the spiritual successor to Wild Arms. However, there's been some turmoil and some drama at these studios where, they did actually get a Penny Blood prequel that they actually promised as part of the Kickstarter for that game. It's like an action RPG that is out on Steam, and it's been out for a while now. So they did get that one out the door, but I don't know if it did that well. I just don't know, the sales or how people even talk about that game, because I'd even forgotten that these games were even in development until Ron brought this up, because I remember this Kickstarter being a big deal. But then after the Kickstarter, I just don't remember hearing that much about these, like either one of these games. So like I'm interested to see, what happens with it. But honestly, Ron, I don't think it looks good. Like I think it will be hard, as you kind of pointed out in the question here, for Penny Blood to find a publisher, or even, Arm Fantasia. Like I think that he has even a less of a chance to find a publisher, and I don't think that they have enough funds from what I've been reading to kind of, do the self-publishing or even get them across the finish line at this point. So I don't know. I think that it's possible that these games just don't see the light of day, which is too bad, because honestly, I would love to play them. Like I personally have a personal, idea to not, fund Kickstarters, and to just buy the games when they come out. Like I would rather fund the games that way, especially because like you're so many situations like this where you can get totally burned by Kickstarter games where the game just never comes out and you never really get your investment back. And I don't love that situation. Like I would rather just support the developers when the game comes out, honestly. And I know, that can be a terrible thing to say, because some games don't get off the ground if you don't support the Kickstarter, but I personally just not into supporting games on Kickstarter. But at the same time, I don't, judge anyone who does. In this case, Ron, I know that you have been, you mentioned here that you backed the Kickstarter, and, you're really, really hoping for these games to come out. But I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I personally don't honestly know if these happen. If any of these get across the fish line, I think it will be Penny Blood. But I just don't know. I just don't know if a developer or a publisher picks these up. But I hope so, man. I hope so, because honestly, these are games I would love to play. But we'll see. Like it's too tough to tell at this point. I just don't know if we know the full story at this point, as well, behind the scenes. But for right now, I think my read on it is like 70-30 that these games never see the light of day. But anyways, I know that's a bit of a downer to end the show on, folks, but I think it's time to wrap up the show this week. But before we go, of course, we got to thank you to all of our patrons over at patreon.com/carpoolgaming, starting with our ultimate producers, Brendan Myers, aka The Winter Gamer, our newest ultimate producer. Also, Jonathan Brown, the man behind the music on the Xbox Drive. You can find his link tree over at linktr.ee/pme.jib and find all of his music over there at Purple Monkey Entertainment, or just PME. You search either one of those in your music player of choice, they should come up. Or TechMike, who says, whether you're a Kevesi or Agnian, you're a Xenobabe at heart. Links to all of our ultimate producers can always be found in the description of our podcast. Our platinum producers, Peje P, Smokin' Joe, the Captain, and Tim Paullin, and our gold members, Adam K, Anna, Awesome Dave 1337, Benny, Brad Moore, Brian Reese, Cecily Carrozza, Dan and Luma, Dannohh, Emily O'Kelly, Jan32, Lorga, Ligerwoods 330, Mr. Giggles, OldMrFrump, and Stephen Keller. Huge thank you once again to all of our patrons over at patreon.com/carpoolgaming. If you want to hop in the car with us, head over there, choose the tier that's right for you. And now it's time to head to the plugs. So first of all, you can always find me on the Discord at Ryan Turford. You can also find me on backlog.com at Ryan Turford, as well as letterbox.com at Ryan Turford. I do need to start updating those more. I've fallen off at least a little bit. But honestly, as far as games and movies are concerned, honestly, I haven't been watching or playing as much stuff this week. GDQ's been on all week. And honestly, I played a lot of Final Fantasy 14 this week. And honestly, that doesn't involve updates on either one of those platforms. But obviously, I'll have an update on Backlog when I finish the Pokemon DLC. So that'll be definitely on there. And then Donkey Kong and Shadow Labyrinth this week, which will be super, super exciting. You can also find me on Blue Sky at Ryan Turford as well. I'm like tipping my toes into the world of social media again, but I'm not like all in, like posting nearly as much as I used to. But I did post a couple of things, so you can definitely check that out as well. I might post other things in the future. Who knows? We'll find out. You can also find Garrett in the Discord at Bland Explosion. You can also find him on backlog.com at Bland Explosion as well. And I believe he's also on the Blue Sky at Bland Explosion as well. And again, we'll see Garrett next week. I know Garrett has been posting some stuff from his vacation. I'm so excited to talk about it when he comes back next week on the show. But until next time, friends, I'm Ryan. This has been the RPG Cave, level 189, and we're out. Good night, everybody.